What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Left Fresh Podcast. Happy Saturday. Hope you all enjoying your weekend. If you're on for the first time, I want to encourage you to subscribe, hit the like button, comment, share, tell a friend, tell a friend. If you're already a subscriber, welcome back. Thank you all for jumping on with me. It's the Saturday Night Live hip hop episode. We got a good lineup of things to talk about today. Got a couple good releases. Got a legendary hip hop birthday, and we also got good discussion to talk about towards the end of the night. So I'm glad you all jumped on tonight. I know it's Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. I know, believe it or not, I got it on as well. Keeping up with the score. Just ready to talk about stuff on Wednesday. Catch that Wednesday episode at 9 p.m. discussing sports. But yeah, tonight's the hip hop episode. The show got to go on. Like I said, I got a good bit of things to talk about. Um, good hip hop came out last week. There was a lot of Drake discussions and everything like that. There's still a lot of Drake discussions going on the internet, but there was also some notable releases yesterday as well. New Music Friday and everything too. So underground and mainstream as well. So good things to talk about right now. I'm going to start off with a legendary hip hop birthday. Um, I want to say first and foremost, rest in peace, happy heavenly birthday to Big L. Um, he had a great legendary run as a hip hop artist on a kind of a lesser known, lesser not mainstream, pretty much. But yeah, his born May 30th, 1974, tragically shot and killed in February 15th, 1999. Uh, but known in the hip hop world as a legendary lyricist. You may have known him from his years working with Cameron and Mace in their early years, Children of the Corn, Digging in the Crates, DITC, working with Lord Finesse and Showbiz and Fat Joe and that legendary lineup, OC and everything like that. So Big L putting it down in the hip hop world throughout the 90s. Did work with many other great artists, notably Jay-Z as well. That's pretty much a lot of people know him for his legendary mixtape freestyle that everybody knows about in the hip hop underground world, or just the true raw hip hop heads. Um, yeah, but he had a notable release in the 90s, but like I said, a lot of his work was mostly underground, independent. Back then, if you were underground if you weren't the mainstream, you were underground. There was no kind of like ambiguous world of how known or relevant you are now. Like, in the streaming era, back then it was just like Big L wasn't really a big mainstream artist, but highly respected by many legendary artists, mainstream or not, especially for his lyrical capability. He's from Harlem. Um, Died tragically at a young age in his 20s. But like I said, if you know Cameron and Mace from their earlier years, they did a lot of work with Big L. Uh, he had a couple projects released posthumously. But when he was alive, he released the Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous. It's a bit of a hardcore album right here. It's released in like 1995. Flew under the radar, of course. It's not. This is the era of Biggie and Pac and Nas, and right before Jay Z, Reasonable Doubt, but Raekwon, Wu Tang. 90s New York was a very deep market, and he stood out amongst them lyrically, a lot of artists. A lot of people call him one of the greatest lyrically. Um, but mainstream wise, he wasn't known for making a big time commercial hit. So a lot of his music is mostly regional. Most knowledge of his talent started off regional. I think the internet throughout the years gave him a lot more exposure. Like, if he released music in the 2010s and the 2020s, he'd be an underground phenomenon. He'd be on a level like a Freddie Gibbs or somebody, or a Bodie James, or artists that have built their clout, just organically. No real major push or anything like that. That's kind of why Big L, you know, lyrically, a lot of people will put him on the same scale as a Jay Z or Biggie, or or Nas, or those type of MCs or big puns and everything like that. But commercially, he doesn't have their commercial hits. So of course, he's one of those names that kind of flew under the radar until, like I said, the internet. I think the internet gave him a lot more exposure to the discussions, a lot of discussions and discourse over the internet, put people on to Big L, and then people went back and listened to him and realized like, yeah, he was a dope MC, and he was, you know, no matter who he's on a song with, he's been on a song with some of the greatest MCs from New York and held his own with all of them. That's no exaggeration. But yeah, Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous, like I said, wasn't a big commercially recognized album. A lot of real raw hip hop heads, especially regionally, New York, East Coasters, typically know this album. Like I said, even this one wasn't exactly a stellar project, but MVP is pretty much a track that everybody knows. Put It On definitely was like the big signature track that had a video, and I remember it getting played back in the day, like on Rap City and everything like that. But Big L, highly slept on, just throughout the years until after he passed, and a lot of the talk and the hearing commentary from other great hip hop artists giving him his flowers and everything like that. That's what kind of led to the reveration that he gets now in modern time, where it's like, oh yeah, Big L, yeah, rest in peace to him, and happy birthdays and everything, seeing it online. That a lot of that is newfound, knowledge of him. Um, when he was rapping, in his heyday and everything, you had to be tapped in to know Big L. Like I said, everybody else was kind of checking for Biggie. Everybody was checking for Snoop, Nas, all the artists that were either breaking out or already out there, major established artists. Um, Major labels wasn't really breaking their budget to showcase Big L at that time. But at the time, I think now people kind of coming back and realizing, hey, Big L was a dope MC. Um, and like I said, most of the real recognition came for Big L after he passed away, after he was killed. In 1999, an album was released that kind of collaborated all of his previous verses and tracks that he did with other artists and features and everything, and just kind of made a collaboration album of all his work after he passed, kind of like a rest in peace album, or, commemoration album. This was the album right here that I always listened to. I remember it came out in 1999. I was like 14 at the time. I was in high school, and I remember, him being tragically killed, and it was like, that made everybody go back and revisit his music, and I was like, man, Big L. And I remember the craze then. I was like, I remember going back like 15, by 14, 15, 16. A lot of people didn't really know who Big L was, and I used to tell people, listen to Big L. And I listened to Big L. And lo and behold, the internet gets invented, and now way more people know about Big L than they did 20, 30 years ago. So yeah, this album right here definitely got him more exposure as well during that time. I mean, like, it didn't push a lot of commercial units, but a lot more people it did give him a lot more exposure than we know. Um, People who found out about his, you know, how cool he was with Jay-Z, doing a freestyle with him and everything like that. You see on this track list right here, the big picture right here, that was probably that was a hard intro. I always love that intro right there. They kind of just, do the rest in peace thing for Big L. And then it starts off with Big L spitting a verse, legendary verse too. That big intro verse Big L spit was legendary right there. Ebonics. If you never heard Ebonics is really him breaking down what each slang word means. And at that time, like, growing up in the East Coast in the 90s and everything, in Harlem and Uptown and everything, a lot of slang. And he broke down all of the different phrases and terms being used. I mean, it was real clever. One of the most clever songs. Like, if you don't know anything about Big L, listen to Ebonics first. You'll see how clever he was with his words and his rhymes and everything and all that different literary devices and everything. He was with that, early in the game. Like, he was ahead of his time. Track number 4, Deadly Combination. Everybody knows this one for having Tupac featured on there. There's another version of Deadly Combination. They got a Biggie and Tupac verse featured on there as well. But the album, the actual album version of Big Picture just has Pac verse. Um, and number 5, 98 Freestyle. That was another one on the radio station he was spitting on. Definitely did his thing on that one. Number 6, Holding It Down. That had a feature with Stan Spit. If y'all don't know Stan Spit, he's from Harlem. He didn't rap much, but he did, and he's Lockheed from character from Belly. If you ever watched Belly with DMX and Nas, Stan Spit was the young dude that got killed at the table with DMX and everything like that. He was the young dude following behind DMX. But that's just a little known fact. Track number 8, Enemy with Fat Joe. Like I said, DITC ties, digging in the crates. Fat Joe and that feature right there. That might have been one of Fat Joe's best verses too. That was a notably good Fat Joe verse. Not saying Fat Joe was bad or anything like that, but you get mixed responses when it comes to Fat Joe, and in that regard, he actually did his thing on that verse right there. The Enemy on Big L's album, Fat Joe actually did his thing. Track number 9, this was right here, Two Lyrical Specimens, Big L and Cool G rap. Yeah, I love this album though. I love this album. I love how they put all these tracks together. Flamboyant, that was the name of his label that he was starting at that time. That was a good beat to that one. He flowed on that one. He went crazy on that, of course. Casualties of a Dice Game. Big L's storytelling on full display. Underrated storyteller. Like I said, he was an MC's MC. You know what I mean? He had graphic content. I mean, it was strictly street material. I mean, I'm gonna warn you right now, but his skill level and his wit and his creativity though was like one of the best. Platinum Plus. If you want to hear a classic Big Daddy Kane verse, it was on that one. Big Daddy Kane showed his longevity too, because it was like in the '90s where everybody kind of thought Big Daddy Kane couldn't make good albums no more, and Big Daddy Kane put that verse to flames right there. So then you see tracks with Sadat X and Guru. Like I said, an MC's MC. The Tribe Barrel with Remy Smith, OC, Fat Joe. Yeah, Big L was definitely an MC's MC. You know what I mean? Everybody, like I said, respected MCs, respected Big L. So even when people didn't know about Big L, MCs didn't let it go too far without saying, yo, Big L was one of them. And, now the crowd, the general public and hip hop community knows that as such as well. And then of course, last year Nas released the Big L Harlem's Finest album, another posthumous release. This one here had more Big L verses that was kind of mixed and mastered and put with other beats, and more modern production and different features, more modern features. Harlem Universal, I like that one with him and McGruff. McGruff still going after all these years. McGruff also from Children of the Corn. Number 2 track with Nas on that feature. Nas put out a lot of OG albums and he did a lot of great verses on them too. Like Nas still going. Um, yeah, he's had other good features. And one with Method Man, Errol Holden. He had another one with Mac Miller that had a verse right there. And then on track number 8, the infamous 7-minute freestyle with him and Jay-Z going back and forth. Both of them went crazy on there. Everybody still debates that Big L had the better verse than Jay-Z. But yeah, Big L definitely did his thing on these albums, did his thing with these verses, like I said, with features. I'm not really sure if he was, going to make a commercial album, but he was definitely going to give you some raw hip hop that, if you're a fan of it, what I'm saying, he's going to give you what you asked for, you know what I'm saying? And then, yeah, just Doo-Wop Freestyle 99 with Joe Button. This one right there with Joey Badass on track 12, Grand's Tomb 97, more relevant artists, more relevant beats a little bit, but Big L verses on there. Just kind of really get to put an illustration how ahead of his time Big L actually was. You know what I mean? So yeah, tragic passing and everything, but legacy as far as music lives on in the hip hop community. Like I said, doesn't necessarily have to be a commercial. Doesn't have necessarily have to have the commercial success, but he definitely made a contribution and an impact that is felt in the hip hop community. So happy heavenly birthday to Big L. Yeah, man, definitely. But yeah, everybody that just jumped on, want to encourage you to subscribe, like, share, comment, tell a friend, tell a friend. This is the last episode of the month of the Left Fresh podcast, going into June, month 6. It's been a great run starting off. Appreciate all the support. Yeah, definitely gonna keep the show moving. Yeah, so Big L's birthday today. Moving on, looking at yesterday, he had some new albums released. A couple of them, just mainly 2 of them that stuck out to me, 3 of them that stuck out to me, of course. One definitely had enough anticipation for people to want to listen to, something for the ladies, of course, but we'll get into that next. Right now, what we got is a quick 3 single EP from Freddie Gibbs, RBT. This one right here was pretty much on brand with Freddie Gibbs. Typically released pretty consistent, flows pretty good, beats pretty smooth. Don't think it's necessarily the best beats I've ever heard from Freddie Gibbs, but it's definitely smooth beats though. Immigrants had a nice sound to it. Rabbit Mode was okay. Action was pretty good. Had the sample from had the reggae sample on there and everything like that. So yeah, I mean, Freddie Gibbs definitely, he came with it on these three singles. Hopefully he's just warming up for like another project down the line. Um, 3 tracks is cool, but that'll hold us for until we're anticipating the next project from Freddie Gibbs. Those who know Freddie Gibbs, you know him from putting out Pinata, albums like Pinata, Bandana, Alfredo. Alfredo 2 just came out last year as well. So, Freddie Gibbs looked like he's getting ready to gear up for another release. I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, these 3 tracks gave you a little something, you know what I mean? Just a little quick something to hold you over until you drop something big. Um, Hopefully the production choices, just hopefully this is a brief little something smooth, like I said, of the production choices because, you know, um, I thought it was a little too smooth. Didn't really think that it had enough, firepower on them. I think action picked it up a little bit, but I wanted to hear something a little more up tempo. I mean, the flow was still pretty good, the bars are still pretty good. Freddie Gibbs delivered. It was pretty consistent. But yeah, hopefully when you look towards the project itself, that it's gonna have a little more up tempo production and not too smooth. I remember a couple of projects where it kind of had that, like I said, if you know Freddie Gibbs, you know Freddie from Pinata, Bandana, Alfredo, and I know Alchemist, he can actually be a little too smooth at times too, but it worked with him. But yeah, like there was other projects where he did, So separately had a very up tempo production, and I like that one. I appreciated So separately because of the production on there. But at the same time, there was other projects after that where it was kind of like, yeah, you could pick up the little production a little bit, just pick up the pace on the production a little bit. But yeah, like I said, 3 tracks, something that was new release. I liked it a little bit. It was smooth enough. Freddie came with it as far as bars. So, like I said, it just got me looking forward to another Freddie Gibbs release. Hopefully that's coming soon, maybe later on in the year, maybe around the summer or after summer in the fall. But Freddie Gibbs dropped 3 new songs. Check it out. It's called RBTs under his singles and EPs. Just a quick something. It ought to hold you. But yeah, that was a new release from Friday. Um, Also, we got for the ladies, Lotto dropped her much anticipated release. A lot of it was centered around her pregnancy. Congratulations to her. There was also a little maybe joking or jest about her dropping her last album, retiring. Maybe it was just maybe the baby on the way. Probably had to thinking about retiring and maybe I don't know. But she retracted after the album came out. So maybe it's a good push for the album. Who knows? But nevertheless, the album dropped. Heard a couple ladies rushing to it, so I thought I'd kind of bring it up just for the lady listeners out there and subscribers who want to check it out. Maybe forgot that it dropped. Here it is. Go ahead, pick it up, check it out on your streaming devices and whatnot. But track list, I'm looking at the appearances and everything. It look like she got some heavy hitters on there. She got Glorilla on GOMF featured right there. You got Doja Cat featuring on OK. You got 21 Savage on there. On that, I heard that beating a little bit on TikTok. Heard Gimme That as well on TikTok. Uh, if you look on tracks 11 through 17, she got Mariah the Scientist. She got Sexy Red, Need Love Too. Tiana Taylor's on there as well. Like I said, me as a guy, I probably won't play it, but as a for the women, lady listeners out there, you got another project to throw on. Sexy Red dropped hers as well. Dropped hers early this year as well. So Big Lotto dropped her release. I wonder if it's going to get the same type of buzz as Sexy Red, because Sexy Red, I'm not gonna say Sexy Red is a lyrical specimen by no stretch of the imagination. I just know that everybody's kind of guilty of falling for her beat selection. So I'm not sure if Lotto has the same beat selection as Sexy Red. I will say that a lot of people kind of like her rapping skills more a little bit, but I don't know if she's gonna hit the same as Sexy Red's project, like the songs more towards the end. Yeah, I thought it kind of picked up a little slow as well. Like I said, when you got Sexy Red and known for her beat selection and everything, all her songs, and Lotto, who's actually the better lyricist. I think Lotto's the better lyricist of the two, but I think that beat got to catch people. Like I said, the first couple songs, I didn't necessarily think the beats really caught anybody, but I think later on in the album, like I said, on that beat kind of caught on because, like I said, I heard it on TikTok and everything. Um, yeah, I can hear the ladies bumping a couple of these tracks for the summertime. They can throw it in the mix with Drake and Sexy Red. But yeah, Lotto's a little bit more, snap bars and everything, a little more lyrical than, the Sexy Red too. So, you know, her on the track with Doja Cat and Glorilla and everything like that. What's that there big? They think Crody wrote it. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like I think Sexy Red got a little more of a pen to her music than I mean, not Sexy Red. I think Lotto got a little more pen to her music than Sexy Red, even though the beats don't really come at you, don't really hit you as hard as Sexy Red's did. Sexy Red do because Sexy Red songs be going viral all the time. People doing all type of crazy dances and everything like that. But Lotto, she comes with hers. Her delivery is good. I will say that. Like I hear her rap, her delivery is real good. Like the how she say it kind of works. You know what I mean? And in that case, you know what you write is kind of just here and there. You know what I mean? Some stuff got a little something to it. Some of the writing is okay, but I think her delivery kind of makes her more of an appeal to listen to. I like Lotto, but this is young Ho music. I just can't give him more play. Yeah, yeah, I think Lotto's more for the younger crowd a little bit as well. I remember her from her days rapping on JD's show. She she hasn't really made a lot of catalog. You know what I mean? Like she's been around for a while, but it's not like a lot of catalog. I think it's like her second album that's really getting a lot of traction. People saying Drake Rose wrote for. I mean, Drake wrote for a lot of people. You know what I mean? Drake definitely wrote for a good bit of people. But yeah, Lotto, another one of the female artists that that are typically thrown in the mix between Cardi B, Meg Thee Stallion, Sexy Red. Um, got a couple other newer young artists coming up between Doechii and it's a good bit. There's a lot of female artists. Ken the Doll. Yeah, there's a lot of female artists out there. So, throwing a release in the mix of there and getting some sort of buzz or traction is a big win because, like I said, a Lotto coming from the Atlanta area, um, you know, her making her music, making her mark as far as this era goes. Like I said, 21 Savage, they did their features type of duet type of thing. But yeah, that's probably one of the most notable releases of it's probably the most notable releases of yesterday. There's only one more I'm really gonna talk about before moving on. But yeah, Lotto, you know, in a wave of female artists standing amongst her own. I can see a couple of singles getting a lot of TikTok play, getting a lot of ladies playlists and everything like that. So yeah, I would say that there was a big win. I don't think she's gonna be retiring anytime soon. But last release yesterday, this one's kind of more for the underground heads, a little bit more for the raw grungy hip hop heads, the hardcore. 38 Spesh released his album Eight Shots yesterday. This one was heavily anticipated throughout the month after hearing his single with had a feature with Method Man, had another single that was featuring with Dave East as well. Look at the track list. The main line, 38 Special Method Man. That one right there went crazy. I like the intro. Free Game was tough. I like the intro. Free Game. Free Game was real good. The beat was on point. I'm not sure how much of the production 38 Special did, but it was tough. That's kind of always been the key with any type of lyrical artist, any type of super lyricist or bars, is you're wondering if the beat's gonna connect with the actual bars. In other cases, you got artists who ain't that good lyrically, you got dope beats, and you're just hoping they can come up with something catchy on a dope beat. This is another case around where you got uh dope lyricists that's getting the beat selection to connect with. And on this one right here, I would have to say 38 Special really connected with the production on this one. This one right here was a really good. And typically the shots collection, the 6 shots, 7 shots, 8 shots collections of 38 Special, usually the production pretty much is on point. Um, One thing I'll say about 38 Special is that you're definitely going to get the same flow every single time. that same flow, that setup, that is it's like a signature almost. You're either gonna like it or you're gonna hate it. Yeah, I like this project. He does less of that enunciated punchline flow. He still does it, but it's a little more laced. You know what I mean? He laces it in there a little bit better. And like I said, I think the beat selection made that a lot better to deal with. Like I can deal with his flow, how repetitive the flow is, as long as the bars was on point. Like the actual when you actually listen to it, them bars got some punch to it, and the beats was on point too. This is like one of 38's best projects right here. Yeah, it's definitely more subtle. He laced it in there real subtly in there this time around. But yeah, free game, main line, used to be the best. I mean, this is kind of I mean, I hate to say, I mean, I normally don't say this too often, like, but this is kind of a straight run. Like, I didn't really skip much. And I listened to it again too. Like, I think Trust Us with Ransom probably had one of the worst beats. And that's not saying much because the beat was still pretty good on that one, but that was probably one of the worst beats. And even then, the bars were so good, it was like kind of carried it. Mental Health with Shane Noir, female artist. Y'all got to check her out too. She's dope. Shane Noir. Yeah, she did. They did their thing on Mental Health. Be the Best was dope. Used to was dope. Great Wall with Curtis Coke. That was a great beat as well. He spit on there as well. Heavy Burden with Dave East. That was another great one. Renovations. Cold War with Busta Rhymes. Busta came through, gave us a good verse. Uh, 12 gave us everything. Yeah, this was 12 tracks, 11 tracks if you exclude the interlude. This was actually a dope project though. I mean, this is probably going to be one of the most slept on projects of the year. I can honestly say that. Rand did what he done as usual per usual. Yeah, Ransom did a great feature verse on there. 38 Spesh did his thing. Dave East came through there as well. Method Man, Ageless Wonder, still killing collabs. He's been killing collabs since Biggie. But not a big Ransom fan. I think it's just his voice. Yeah, he's not really like I said, it's an artistry thing but bar for bar, I think Ransom constructs his verses like as good as anybody. But yeah, Davies' voice didn't really match the beat, but like I said, this beat was pretty dope and his verse was pretty good still. But yeah, 38, even on the songs by himself, Be the Best, Used to. He's giving you solid songs as well, too. Like that's the most impressive part that that I'm getting from this album is like, he's making cohesive projects. The beat selection is on point. Like I said, he's already known for bars, so he's delivering with that as well. This one right here was kind of like my um I don't want to say unexpected surprise. I expected it to be good, but it was even better than I expected. And this was kind of like the release of the weekend for me. Like I can actually despise Davies' voice. I like electric cat open. Ouch. Yeah, man, he's got the raspy voice, but I mean, yeah, he delivered. But yeah, I gotta understand that. But yeah, this 38 Spesh project right here, um, I can see this being one of the most slept on projects of the year, especially him not being major or big time artist, not in the big three discussions, anything like outside of a big three. Everything else seems to be slept on. She said, "Don't do Dave like that." Hey, it's an even trade off. Neither one of y'all like one of their voices. You don't like Red voice, you don't like Dave voice. I mean, hey, that's funny to me, man. But I think the bars is like what it really come down to, bars and beats. And the beats match too. It wasn't like beats that didn't match. It wasn't like beats like I'm trying to go commercial. Um, it wasn't the beats like I'm trying to go commercial. It was the beats that actually fit the type of bars and the content. He has bars, man. He has reached his peak though. Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of these artists are at their peak. They just keep going. And it's like, I think it's at a time in the game where it's like we can use it. So it's like, especially like I said, the key point when you got lyricists is beat selection because a lot of great beat selection doesn't always come with great lyricism. And it kind of makes up for bad lyricism or subpar lyricism. And then you got, great lyricists who don't always pick the best beats. Beats are too grungy, too basic, too meh, too bleh. But yeah, this one right here, I felt like it delivered. So yeah, we had 38 Spesh, we had Lotto, we had Freddie Gibbs. We had an interesting new music Friday, a week removed from Drake's release, which everyone is still talking about. Um, streams through the roof and everything like that. Um, but we're at the midway point. Yeah. So, like I said, I want to encourage everybody to subscribe, like, share, tell a friend, tell a friend. Thank you all for jumping on. Like I said, I hope you all having a great weekend. It's Left Fresh Podcast. You can find me on Instagram at This Is Left Fresh. You can also find me on TikTok at This Is Left Fresh as well. Yeah, 2 weeks. That's right. 2 weeks from the Drake uh backlash. Yeah, it feels like a week because I mean the way everybody's still talking about it. I mean, yeah, he's past Jay-Z, #1 Billboard and everything like that. Yeah, Iceman is jamming though. Yeah, he's still he's still hitting with some hits. I mean, that was one of his best releases in a long time. Drake's Iceman is probably one of the best Drake albums in a long time. Like I think people saying best since Views. It's better than Views. I don't even remember even liking Views like that. I thought Views had a couple of tracks and it was kind of just move on from. But yeah, this one, Iceman, definitely does have some replay value. So I mean, I got to give credit where it's due. There's an in between point between being a fan and being a hater, and in between, yeah, Drake did his thing on that project. He really had a vengeance on his mind. So, but yeah, a lot of projects still flying under the radar. Yeah, yeah, better than Views. Yeah, yeah, I think it's definitely better than Views. Like I said, it's kind of nearing that. It's almost near that nothing was the same category. You know what I mean? Like it's right before, right after nothing was the same type of world. Of course, not quite Take Care, but yeah, nothing was the same. It's in that realm. Yeah, replay value. Yeah, yeah, I gotta say it, man. Yep, it's definitely better replay value than J Cole. Fall Off. I can only probably think of maybe two or three songs I actually still revisit from the Fall Off, and Iceman already has that beat. I mean, make them the songs that said make them on Iceman. I can go back and revisit those before I can revisit, the songs on the Fall Off album. Uh, be interesting to see what Kendrick does. I can still listen to some of that Kendrick stuff too, but yeah, I think Drake and yeah, I wasn't really feeling the Cole album. Yeah, I feel like Cole, when you revisit it, um, it has like songs that just were too low. You know what I mean? Like songs that was just felt rushed and kind of thrown together, just songs that it probably could have just been taken off the album. Like I said, it was a couple singles I could still revisit, but yeah, I'm definitely can see myself. Yeah, Cole tried to do too much. The two disc thing, it was the several disc thing. Like, Drake did 3 albums, but he didn't even do the same genre twice. You know what I mean? Like Drake gave you about 12 albums off Iceman, and it was their songs after that. You know what I mean? Cole gonna give you too much writing. It's too much, too much lyrical for Cole to give you that type of value. Yeah, he should have made a solid album instead of 2 discs. Yeah, yeah, it was too much. Like it was like he wanted to make the Vengeance album. Drake wanted to make the Vengeance album, and Kendrick kind of just did a victory lap with GNX. You know what I mean? And it was like, um, and then there's Future in the middle. I heard somewhere somebody said Future's like did a track with all of them, despite the big three all beefing and everything. Future been on the track with all of them. But yeah, that was just funny how Future's like the wild card. But yeah, Drake released 3 different type of albums. Cole too monotone to do a double disc. Exactly. Yeah. Like Drake did 3 different genres, all type of different ranges. And that's kind of where Drake's strength has always been his versatility. You know what I mean? He's not just rapping. He's basically doing pop and singing and all that other different areas and everything else too. So like, when people say Drake is a one-man hit maker, he is. I mean, that's just the reality of it. I don't subscribe to, oh, that makes him the GOAT, you know what I mean? Like, there's certain fans that feel like he's the GOAT off of it. To me, I wouldn't go that far, but at the same time, Drake has all the components of a hit song. He does the hook, he writes the verses, picks the beats, uh, that's kind of where we're at. And Cole kind of on the Fall Off album, it was a little more beats that dragged a little bit. Again, you start seeing a little bit of the flaw in the beat selection. Like I said, it was just too many songs for one direction. Drake went 3 different directions. It was easy to kind of cover a lot of different things when you're doing 3 different directions. Cole kind of went one direction, too many songs. And then you had Kendrick, who made another album that dropped another album that had a Grammy. So, you know, that's kind of where we're at with the big three. But in between that, you still had a lot of albums flying under the radar. Got 1,000 more artists, plenty of other music to check out. Like I said, with so much volume of music, it's easy to come across music where you're kind of like not liking it. And then, it kind of turns you off the music that you may like. I would tell you to just keep on searching as somebody who is more like a connoisseur or just completely just searching through music on a daily. I would tell you just keep searching. It's an extensive search, but you'll find plenty of good music that you want to listen to in a sea of music that you probably don't want to listen to. Which leads to my last segment. This is an interesting one. This is for definitely for nostalgia. Kind of one of our favorite realms to go into, of course. Kind of ties nostalgia into where we're at today, though. It's an interesting conversation that was had. Nelly was featured on a podcast about, I want to say a couple weeks ago. And when I say a couple weeks ago, I want to say back in maybe February or back in March, about 2 months ago. Something that recirculated, and I felt like I didn't really talk about it, and I should have. So figure what time is a good time as any to go ahead and discuss it. So Nelly, back in March, was appearing on a podcast speaking, and he was talking about during his time and during his run when he put out songs, he had to go against a long slew of great hip hop artists that sold a slew of records in the 2000s. When I put out songs, I had to go against DMX, Jay Z, Eminem, Lil Wayne, 50 Cent, Ludacris. All of us are fighting for one spot. And, I'm gonna say what's to Nelly's point, and I got a little bit of pushback, a little bit of kickback, a little elaboration to it. But I'm not necessarily disagreeing with what Nelly's saying because if you look back, it's good nostalgia to look back on if you in your 30s and 40s and you were out partying in the 2000s, or if you were in growing up I'm growing up in middle school, high school, growing up on music in the 2000s and everything. You remember what type of time this was. A lot of us probably saying right now, what a time to be alive. Yeah, we came into the 2000s, backing it up with Juvenile, and then it just kind of moved into the this realm of just nonstop, top selling, chart topping albums. It was kind of a wave of the 2000s, kind of just, I looked at the 2000s like it picked up where the 90s left off. Like the 90s was like a big renaissance. Everybody knows the 90s for what it was. We're now at the 20-year mark of the 2000s. Like the 90s is now 30 years behind us. In the 2010s, we kind of really revisited the 90s a lot in the last decade because it was 20 years old and we had a different newfound appreciation for the 90s. Some of us revisited the 90s and saw a couple not so good spots in the 90s after revisiting it. But yeah, the 90s was really glorified like maybe 10, 15 years ago. And then now we're in the 2020s and we're looking back on the 2000s as that turning period and what type of period it was and re-examining it and putting a nice little microscope on it and looking at what Nelly said. I think there was a little bit of glaze to it, but that's his era. That's how you're supposed to feel about your era. I think, in a time when you really look back at it, yeah, all those artists were, eating good. Those six artists right there. I mean, Jay-Z not pictured. You also got T.I. not pictured. You got Young Jeezy not pictured. You got The Game not pictured. Even when you look at 50 Cent, right? Remember the G Unit wave, even his artists were selling multi-platinum records. Young Buck, Lloyd Banks, they had albums that were going multi-platinum. It was at a time where like everybody 2000s probably had one of the highest demands for hip hop. It was that, hip hop was pretty much coming off a very big peak. It was still in the middle of a peak, at a very sharp peak, where you had artists that were just taking off on a meteoric rise. You know what I mean? Like Nelly came out of nowhere and went diamond. DMX came out of nowhere and went multi-platinum on like 2, 3 straight albums in the late 90s, the end of 90s. DMX ended the 90s going multi-platinum on 3 straight albums, debuting at number one. Eminem came out, sold crazy units. Ludacris came out, sold crazy numbers. And then, of course, 50 Cent, he came out, meteoric rise. You know, um, Lil Wayne eventually. Lil Wayne was probably the last one of the 2000s to have like a really big spike in record sales. That Carter 3 um, first first week sales was probably like the last. That was the last album to really have like monumental numbers like on the first release. I mean, of course, Drake now in the streaming. I mean, right before the streaming era kind of took off. Like all those guys had crews. Yeah, yeah. Rough Riders, DMX, Eminem, Shady Aftermath, Ludacris, DTP, Disturbing the Peace, 50 Cent, G Unit, Nelly, Saint Lunatics. Lil Wayne broke off from Cash Money and eventually Young Money. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They all had factions. They all had label deals. And to me, that falls under the Nelly, Saint Lunatics. Yeah, exactly. All of those had movements, and that was all funded by a big push that they got from major labels at that time. Like, labels were putting heavy investment in artists, and it was paying off dividends. And that's like I said, that was that kind of that off the heels of the '90s. You think about it, in the '90s, it really took off to a different levels. When the West Coast and then New York resurgence, and then the South picked up, all that, all in one 10-year span of the '90s. And in the 2000s, it just one big pot and just blew up. You know what I mean? One big explosion. Every artist, one after the other, just boom, platinum, boom, platinum, boom, double platinum, boom, multi-platinum. I mean, it was almost to a point where it was like, yeah, Jay, State Prop, and Rockefeller. It was almost to a point where, like I said, you had smaller, lesser artists that were still going platinum and everything like that. I mean, and then you had artists that were struggling to go gold or just happy to go gold. There was a handful of artists that were getting bigger pushes than everybody else, and everybody else kind of just on the outside looking in, just kind of either making regional music, mixtapes. Back then, like I said on the last hip hop episode, I talked about the greatest mixtape runs. A lot of artists were relegated to mixtapes that they weren't getting that big push. And no better example than 50 Cent. 50 Cent was pretty much blackballed from mainstream, making a mixtape after mixtape until finally he was too much to deny. Shady Aftermath and Dr. Dre signed him. And then there was that meteoric rise I was talking about. Diamond on the first album release, Nelly, Diamond on the first album release, Ludacris, multi-platinum on the first couple album releases, DMX. All of these artists started off hot, came in the door like at a time where you only had a handful of artists that was really getting all of the play, getting all of the push. And then you had everybody else just kind of getting that regional push. It wasn't really no competition for a lot of these artists. So kind of to a little bit of a pushback to what Nelly was saying, there really wasn't much competition. You guys wasn't really competing with each other. I mean, they was all fighting for number one, but they was all selling an astronomical amount of records during that time. So nobody was missing any meals or getting left out in the cold for the other. There wasn't really much of a competition other than just the top spot amongst them. But, this was at a time, and it really kind of just, not to ruin childhoods here a little bit, but this is at a time where radio station, the fight for number one was who was paying the most money to have their songs played on the radio. I mean, radio stations was getting fat off of these, off of payola. I mean, keep it real. I mean, a lot of these artists really got spins and everything, videos, interviews, magazines. A lot of those outlets were getting paid to push particular artists, those artists, and that's kind of the real reality of it. You know what I mean? So when you saw those astronomical sales, that was pretty much marketing at its work, and that's why I always say sales isn't the end all metric because I mean, yeah, the goal is to make money, but really how much of the albums were revered is really the question. Do we really revere those albums? This is why, Grammys are another aspect or just album review or critic, this is where that comes in. And this is at a time even where magazines would push albums as well because, they were getting paid to. But, actual opinion in hindsight is what really really sets the clears the dust of off everything. You actually look now and say, Ludacris, how many albums does Ludacris have a classic album? I mean, they all sold a lot of records at the time. Luda has a lot of singles, a lot of hits. He can definitely do a verses, but was there a particular Ludacris project that we actually put into a realm of classic? Let me know about that. Country Grammar, one of the highest selling hip hop albums ever. Um, and he never, nobody puts Nelly in. Like, I don't think nobody has really serious conversations about Nelly, respectfully. He makes hits. He made hits during that period. But album, album revere is a big question as well. Chicken and Beer, yeah, that was a solid Luda album right there. I think Luda kind of falls into the Redman, Busta Rhymes category where he's highly underrated. His conversations with him only go but so far. He's always highly respected, and that's pretty much it. Pretty much known for solid albums. Like I said, the classic albums is usually what people are going to debate because people usually don't bring up Luda's discography enough, and it is a dope discography though. Nellyville was another one. Yeah, after Country Grammar, Nellyville was another solid one. That was the Nelly peak. You know what I mean? Like Nelly peak was another high, very high peak. That's the key. That's kind of one of the correlations with these artists as well. That all of them had a very high peak. I'm not saying they didn't have longevity. They got longevity, but they're pretty much personified by this extremely high peak during that same period that Nelly is talking about. Like Nelly debuted in 2000, DMX debuted in the late 90s, but he was still selling albums in the 2000s. Even though they wasn't the same quality as the albums in the 90s, at late 90s point, his first three albums were way better than the last couple of albums. Those albums were still getting a lot of sales because of um, notoriety. People were just anticipating DMX, dropping a great album, even if it didn't turn out that great. Uh, Lil Wayne, artist that started off hot with the Hot Boys, of course, made a resurgence. Now remember, Carter 1 and Carter 2 were solid Lil Wayne albums. They were great Lil Wayne albums, but Carter 3, like the year before Carter 3 and around that Carter 3 radius is where he's really ascended. And he kind of outlasted everybody on this list. Lil Wayne outlasted everybody on the list. They all had their runs fairly early in the 2000s. So like when Nelly, damn, it seemed like all of their sophomore albums were great. Yeah, they were. Yeah, Carter 2 was his best work. I mean, Carter 2 was definitely my favorite Lil Wayne album. I'm just saying, like, he hit that commercial peak at Carter 3. And Carter 1 and 2 were both dope projects to me. Those were like two of my favorite Lil Wayne projects. If I had to pick between the Carter albums, 1 and 2 were definitely two of my favorite. But yeah, Carter 3 was like, oh man, he was everywhere after that. A Millie was Lil Wayne at his highest peak. Yeah, mixtape Wayne was a monster. That's what I'm saying. Like, we remember the dedication to drop mixtapes that came out around late 06, 07. That's when Lil Wayne really turned that corner. And then Carter 3 was like that meteoric peak where he had like the first week sales through the roof. And that was like commercially during the FM radio days, disc copy days, still kind of switching over into digital and streaming, where Lil Wayne kind of had like the last high release first week sales type of thing. At that point before the game kind of shifted, which is kind of like, back to Nelly's conversation was like Nelly is speaking about a period early in the 2000s. Like I said, 2000s, Nelly, early 2000 DMX, people still waiting on him to get back to that 90s. He was still anticipated. Eminem was hot in the 2000s. Even though sales and streams are still crazy through the roof to this day, you can debate that he kind of just started to taper off around the mid 2000s, towards the late 2000s. Same thing with Ludacris. Same thing with 50. Same thing with DMX. Like I said, Lil Wayne kind of took off and went the other direction, went further up later in the 2000s. But the rest of the artists Nelly talked about kind of hit a taper off point a little bit. You know what I mean? Like I said, Luda, 50, they were still making music, still can connect, still make good songs and everything, but they weren't doing the numbers they were doing in the early 2000s. And I think overall, hip hop hit a dynamic shift towards the mid 2000s because we're at a point in 20 years from the 2000s. Yeah, only dudes moving units, in Pimp, Juice, and us. Good old Hove, exactly. Put in personified it perfectly. And if you remember, that was um around 2000, and that was in the 2000s. I want to say 2002, whatever, like that. Yeah. Excuse me, miss. Right there at the height of what Nelly was talking about, where everybody was selling records at the same time, and it was like, even when you think about '03, '04, '05, like I said, that's really when the South really started picking up. Lil Jon was selling a bunch of numbers. Um, Up to that point, remember T.I.'s first couple projects were more or less gold and trap music and I'm serious and trap music. They were pretty much gold albums. I remember him beefing with Lil Flip, and Lil Flip was basically calling, was like, "Why would I diss a gold artist?" Like mocking him. And then that's when Ti kind of hit that mark. When he finally came out with like Urban Legend, and then next thing you know, King album was through the roof, and that sold a lot of units as well. And then you also had Jeezy who went platinum with Thug Motivation 101. You had Game that went platinum with the documentary album. He went platinum a couple times. So like everybody was soaring at that point. Yeah, Urban Legend, like I said, Urban Legend and King was T.I.'s meteoric peak. So, the 2000s was like that commercial peak where it's like there was a high demand for artists. And if you came out hot, you was gonna come out hot through the roof. First two projects, you was going through the roof. Even Jeezy's follow-up still did well numbers wise. But it was around, I want to say '06. Yeah. What you know about that was T.I.'s transition to exactly. Yeah. He wasn't just Atlanta anymore. He wasn't just a regional favorite anymore. He became a superstar. ATL. What you know about that? And like I said, '06. And that was a transition period because to me, '06 is where you kind of seen DMX kind of fade away. You seen Nelly kind of fade away. You seen Ludacris. Ludacris was always the bigger artist, like commercially than Ti. Everybody in the streets loved Ti in Atlanta, but Ludacris was the commercial artist that sold platinum, multi-platinum records. Ti was the gold artist. It was around '06 where you see that tide change where Ludacris, he tried to do release therapy, cut the braids off, try to get serious, stop hanging upside down, put the big muscle fist down, and it didn't really resonate. And then Ti was hot, and then he got locked up. Then Lil Wayne took his turn, and then you saw the Gucci Mans and the Soldier Boys, and that's when the late 2000s came in. And then at that point, like I said, other than Lil Wayne, it was really at that point it was like Lil Wayne saved the game. Remember that? Remember that narrative at that time? Lil Wayne was saving hip hop at that point. The late 2000s was the dry spell, was the drought. Like after '06, I think when Ti got locked up around '07, like you know, he tried to come back out of prison strong, and then he kind of lost his momentum a little bit. And then, Lil Wayne, he lost his momentum in the 2010s is when he lost his momentum, but he was still kind of hot in 2008, 2009, at the late 2000s. So, I want to say the 2000s started off scorching, and then towards the middle of the 2000s, it kind of just started to taper off, where you started seeing less and less artists really dominating. And then you started, yeah, it changed to the streets and drug users. Yeah, and then it's like you think about, regionally, the South was had a lot of regional songs that was like really like, Roscoe Dash and Travis Porter, Waka Flocka and Gucci. You know, we started seeing a lot of regional divide, like a lot of regional tribalism as far as listeners go. And then of course, a lot of that had to do with the internet. YouTube really started taking off. Like I said, Soldier Boy was getting famous off of YouTube. A lot of independent artists was starting to catch on because of the internet. And it was at that point where I think people really stopped really tuning and stopped liking mainstream hip hop like that as well. Like I think to Nelly's point, yet to Nelly to work against Nelly, yeah, Future, yep. Yeah, I was about to say when Future came in. Yeah, and I mean, when to Nelly's point, like I said, he came in, it was tough, it was fierce, but after that point, it was briefly after that point too. You know, it was a shift like in the mid 2000s where, like I said, the internet came in. Um, a lot of those artists, there was so much push and so much sales, so much push to get those sales that artists became oversaturated really fast. Like as soon as they got hot, people got sick of them. And it's we look at it now, we jam to the best songs now 20 years later. We're like, oh, this was hot. This is what music sound like, man. This stuff trash now. When we got sick of them, we got sick of them. When we got sick of Nelly, we got sick of Nelly. When DMX couldn't give it to us no more, we were like, yeah, man, we wish DMX can get back to himself. We want to say that, respectfully, but DMX was past his best years. 50 Cent, we got hip to his formula. when he did the challenge. Oh, one person that we got to talk about on there, I forgot Kanye West. How did we forget to talk about Kanye West? Was also another one that took off. Towards the end of the decade, he took off in the middle part of the decade. And then he was there with Lil Wayne was left as well. Kanye was still there as well. Cannot forget Kanye. Um, but even then, Lil Wayne still had the narrative of saving hip hop because Kanye was going into like a different type of bag. He was going to the pop auto tune, and that's another thing. T Pain, that aspect, the auto tune aspect, the dance songs was oversaturated at that point as well. People wanted to just dance. You know, hip hop was kind of at a crossroads in the mid 2000s, and it kind of just that crossroads kind of just traveled throughout the 2010s because even now that crossroads still exists. With Future and his lane, you got the big threes and their lyrical lane, and you got underground artists everybody sleeps on. So I mean, honestly, it's still the same effect in a little bit to this day. The only difference is less payola and FM radio. But yeah, that's kind of the difference. I mean, this and even now there's thousands of more artists. There's way more artists now. Like I can honestly say it might be more impossible to sell the amount of records that these artists sold now in today's game, in today's streaming era. I mean, there could be a lot of crazy streams. I mean, it's honestly crazy though, because Eminem and 50 Cent still have some of the highest streams ever, still have some of the highest streams today. And that's still attributed to the amount of payola and conditioning that the consumer has been that we learned growing up listening to them. There are major labels push them to the moon, and people listen to them religiously. And even to this day, they still have high streams because of the buzz that they built during the old payola days. People still listen to Lil Wayne. People still listen to DMX. People still listen to Nelly. People still listen to Ludacris old hits. They still get royalties from music and everything like that. So it's not a knock to say that they didn't make timeless music. It's just a little added extra to the fact that dynamic of how these artists were able to all just come out firing at once at a time where it was like super, and I guess it was super competitive because everybody was trying to sell the most records. But in hindsight, there was a big aid in pushing their sales that they had almost nothing to do with. They was all making great music at a time, and as opposed to really competing with each other. In hindsight, what they were really doing was kind of just sitting down at a table, all eating good together, and just trying to see how much they can all eat off the table. But and there was a whole bunch of different artists out there, some pretty good. Your little brothers. You had other different artists that were kind of flying under the radar, the 2000s, making great music and stuff too, that just, lesser known and everything as well. So, I mean, there'll be other episodes where I'll go back and revisit some of those albums that was slept on and, flew under the radar during that time period. But and then of course I'll be revisiting albums that we probably comb through in the more recent era because there is no payola. So in the 2010s and just a big streaming era, just a big wide range of artists. Some you want to listen to, some you don't. And that's what I'm here for, to provide you the ones that you may or may not want to listen to. But yeah, that's my time for the night. Hope you all had a great evening. Glad to talk hip hop with you all on this Saturday Night Live episode. Hope you all tune in on Wednesday for the 9 o'clock sports talk episode. You can find me on Instagram at This Is Left Fresh. You can find me on TikTok at This Is Left Fresh. I'll be back next Saturday as well at 10 o'clock this same time to discuss more hip hop and more interesting content for you all. Tune in. Hope you all have a great night. Hope you all have a great weekend. This is the Left Fresh podcast signing out. Have a great night. Peace.